The morning Eliza Warren walked into Salvation Creek with her head held high and her belly swollen with child, the whispers started before she even reached the general store. It was July of 1872, and the Colorado Territory town sat nestled in a valley where the Rocky Mountains cast their long shadows across wooden buildings that still smelled of fresh pine. Eliza had traveled 3 weeks by wagon from Kansas, her hands blistered from holding the reins, her heart heavy with the weight of her circumstances. She was 22 years old, unmarried, and visibly pregnant. In a town where respectability meant everything, she might as well have worn a scarlet letter across her chest. The general store owner, a pinched-faced woman named Mrs. Hutchins, served her with tight lips and disapproving eyes. "We're a decent town here," she said, her voice carrying across the store so everyone could hear. "I hope you understand that." Eliza paid for her supplies without responding. She had learned in the past months that words rarely changed minds already made up. Her situation was what it was. The man who had promised to marry her, a banker's son from Topeka, had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby. His family had paid her to leave town quietly, and she had taken the money because she needed to survive, but she would not hide in shame. This child was innocent, and she would love it fiercely. She found a small cabin on the outskirts of town, a place the previous owner had abandoned after his wife died. It needed work, but the roof was solid and the walls kept out the wind. She spent her first week scrubbing floors and patching holes, preparing a nest for the life she carried. The trouble started when she went to see Reverend Blackwell. She had not expected a warm welcome, but she had hoped for Christian charity. The Reverend was a tall man with a long beard and eyes that seemed to look right through a person. He listened to her request with his hands folded on his desk, and when she finished speaking, he shook his head slowly. "Bibrisu. Miss Warren, I understand your predicament, but I cannot in good conscience perform a baptism for a child born out of wedlock without the mother first repenting before the entire congregation." Eliza felt her spine stiffen. "I have nothing to repent for that I have not already made peace with God about in my own prayers." "Then I am afraid I cannot help you." His voice was firm. "This church has standards. If I make an exception for you, what message does that send to the rest of my flock?" She stood, her legs trembling but her voice steady. "It would send the message that God's love is greater than man's judgment, but I can see I was mistaken about finding that here." As she walked out of the church, she heard him call after her. "No preacher in this territory will marry you either, Miss Warren, not in your condition. You have made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences." His words followed her like a curse through the following weeks. She tried 2 other churches in neighboring towns, traveling by a borrowed horse, her body aching with the effort. Each time the answer was the same. They would not perform any sacraments for her. She was marked, unwelcome, cast out from the very institutions that preached forgiveness. It was mid-August when she first saw the mountain man. She'd gone into the woods beyond her cabin to gather kindling, moving slowly because the baby seemed to press against her ribs with every step. The forest was cool and green, alive with the sound of birds and the whisper of wind through pine needles. She had bent to pick up a fallen branch when she heard the crack of a twig behind her. Eliza turned and found herself facing the largest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun filtering through the trees. His arms were thick with muscle, visible beneath the rolled sleeves of his buckskin shirt. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his face was covered with a full beard that could not hide the strong line of his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep blue like the mountain lakes, and filled with a wariness that matched her own. They stared at each other for a long moment. Eliza's heart pounded, but she refused to show fear. She had faced down enough judgment in recent months that a mountain man in the woods seemed almost ordinary. "I'm just gathering wood," she said, her chin lifting. "I have a cabin just beyond that ridge. I'm not trespassing on anyone's claim." The man's eyes moved to her swollen belly, then back to her face. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle, a low rumble that reminded her of distant thunder. "Did not say you were. These woods do not belong to anyone. You are welcome to whatever you need." He had an accent she could not quite place, something that spoke of education mixed with years of living rough. His clothes were well worn but clean, his boots solid and practical. At his belt hung a hunting knife and a pistol, but his hands remained at his sides, non-threatening. "Thank you," Eliza said, uncertain what else to say. She turned back to her work, aware of him watching her. After a moment she heard him move, and she thought he was leaving. Instead, he began gathering larger branches, his powerful arms making quick work of what would have taken her an hour. "You do not need to do that," she said. "I know." He kept working, creating a neat pile of dry wood. "But you should not be straining yourself in your condition. When is the baby due?" The question was so matter-of-fact, so free of judgment, that Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "October, I think. Maybe late September." He nodded and continued gathering wood until he had assembled enough to last her a week. Then he bundled it with a length of rope he produced from his pack and lifted the entire load as though it weighed nothing. "I will carry this to your cabin," he said. "Lead the way." Eliza hesitated, but something in his steady gaze told her she could trust him. She led him through the trees to her small home, acutely aware of how humble it must appear. But he said nothing about the rough cabin or the way the door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. He simply stacked the wood neatly beside her porch and straightened. "I am Eliza Warren," she said. "Thank you for your kindness." "Nathaniel Cross." He touched his fingers to his forehead in a casual salute. "I have a camp about 3 miles north, up in the high country. I hunt and trap, bring pelts down to trade every few weeks. If you need anything, leave a red cloth tied to that pine tree there. I will see it and come down." "Why would you help me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "You do not know me." Nathaniel's blue eyes studied her for a long moment. "I know enough. I know you are alone and doing your best. That is more than most can say." He turned to leave, then paused. "The town folks giving you trouble?" "Nothing I cannot handle." His expression suggested he did not quite believe her, but he nodded. "Just remember about the red cloth." He disappeared into the forest like a ghost, his large frame moving with surprising grace through the undergrowth. Eliza stood on her porch long after he vanished, her hand resting on her belly, wondering about the strange mountain man who had shown her more kindness in 15 minutes than the entire town had in weeks. The baby kicked, a strong flutter against her palm, and she smiled despite everything. "We will be all right," she whispered. "Somehow we will be all right." Over the following weeks, Eliza saw Nathaniel 3 more times, once when he appeared at her door with a haunch of venison, refusing any payment. "You need the meat more than I need the money," he said simply. Another time she found him repairing her sagging porch rail, working in the early morning before she had even risen. When she came out with coffee, he accepted it with a nod but few words, his hands moving with practiced skill over the wood. The third time was different. She had gone into town for supplies, her money dwindling, but enough for flour and salt. Mrs. Hutchins served her with the same cold disapproval, but it was the group of women near the fabric table who caused the real trouble. Eliza recognized them from church, respectable wives of respectable men. "Shameless," one of them said, loud enough to carry. "Walking around like she has nothing to hide." "My husband says she tried to get the Reverend to baptize her bastard," another added. "Can you imagine the nerve?" Eliza kept her eyes on her purchases, her hands shaking as she counted out coins. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. But as she turned to leave, one of the women stepped into her path. "You should leave Salvation Creek," the woman said. Her name was Catherine Porter, and she was the banker's wife, all puffed up righteousness and pearl buttons. "We do not want your kind here, corrupting our town." "Please let me pass," Eliza said quietly. "Or what? You will seduce our husbands the way you seduced whatever man fathered that child? You are nothing but a—" "That is enough." The voice came from behind Eliza, and she turned to see Nathaniel filling the doorway of the general store. He had to duck his head to enter, and suddenly the space seemed much smaller with his presence. He wore his usual buckskins, his long hair loose around his shoulders, and he looked every inch the wild man the town folks whispered about. But his eyes were clear and calm as they fixed on Catherine Porter. "The lady asked you to let her pass," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I suggest you do so." Catherine's face flushed red. "This is none of your concern, Cross. Go back to your mountain." "Anything involving basic human decency is my concern." He moved to stand beside Eliza, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his massive frame. "Miss Warren has done nothing to any of you except exist. If that offends you, perhaps you should examine your own souls." Mrs. Hutchins cleared her throat nervously. "Mr. Cross, please. We do not want trouble." "Then there will not be any." His hand came to rest gently on Eliza's back, guiding her toward the door. "Come on, you have your supplies. Let us go." Eliza walked out on trembling legs, aware of every eye in the store watching them. Once outside, she had to lean against the hitching post to catch her breath, her heart racing. Nathaniel stood beside her, a silent wall of protection, until she had composed herself. "Thank you," she managed. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did." His blue eyes searched her face. "They have been bothering you like this often?" "I can handle it." "That is not what I asked." Eliza looked up at him, this strange mountain man who kept appearing when she needed him most, and felt something shift inside her chest. "Why do you care?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving across the mountains that rose beyond the town. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I spent 5 years back east, trying to live the life my family wanted. Respectability, society, all the proper rules and manners. It nearly killed me, trying to fit into a mold that was not my shape. When I came out here, I swore I would never again let anyone tell me how to live or who to be." He looked back at her. "I see that same stubborn determination in you. You refuse to bow to their judgment, and I respect that." Something warm bloomed in Eliza's chest, something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of something deeper. "I should get home," she said softly. "I will walk with you." They made their way through town together, Nathaniel leading his horse and matching his pace to her slower steps. People stared, of course, but no one said anything. There was something about Nathaniel's presence that discouraged confrontation. He was not aggressive or threatening, but there was a quiet strength about him that demanded respect. When they reached her cabin, Eliza turned to thank him again, but the words dried up when she saw the way he was looking at her. There was warmth in those blue eyes, and something else. Admiration, perhaps. It made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced in months. "Nathaniel," she said, then paused, unsure how to continue. "I know." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "You do not need to say it. Just remember, you are not alone anymore. Not if you do not want to be." He left her with those words hanging in the air, and Eliza stood on her porch watching until he disappeared into the forest. Inside the cabin, she pressed her hand to her chest and felt her heart beating wildly. The baby kicked, as if responding to her emotion, and she laughed despite the tears on her cheeks. "Oh, little one," she whispered, "what is happening to us?" September arrived with cool nights and the first hints of gold in the aspen leaves. Eliza's belly had grown so large she could barely see her feet, and every movement required effort. She spent her days preparing for the baby as best she could, sewing tiny clothes from fabric scraps and arranging the corner of the cabin that would serve as a nursery. Nathaniel came more frequently now, always bringing something useful. A cradle he had carved from pine, the wood smooth and beautiful. A thick bearskin to keep the baby warm. Dried herbs that he said would help with her labor pains, taught to him by a Ute woman he had befriended years ago. He stayed longer during each visit, helping with repairs to the cabin or simply sitting on the porch talking while she shelled beans or mended clothes. She learned about his life in pieces. He had grown up in Boston, the son of a wealthy merchant who expected him to take over the family business. But Nathaniel had felt suffocated by city life, by the endless social obligations and meaningless conversations. After his mother died, he had headed west, seeking something he could not name. He found it in the mountains, in the simplicity of living close to the land, testing himself against nature's challenges. "Do you ever miss it?" Eliza asked one afternoon. They were sitting on her porch, watching clouds drift across the sky. "The comfort? The security?" "No." His answer was immediate. "I miss my mother sometimes. She understood me better than anyone. But the rest?" He shook his head. "Out here, a man is judged by his actions, not his family name or the size of his bank account. That suits me fine." Eliza smiled. "The town folks think you are strange. They tell stories about the wild man in the mountains." "Let them talk." Nathaniel's lips quirked beneath his beard. Their opinions mean less than nothing to me. Besides, they say worse things about you, and you are one of the finest people I have ever met. His words warmed her more than the September sun. You barely know me, Nathaniel. I know enough. He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. I know you are brave and strong. I know you love that baby fiercely, even though carrying it has cost you everything. I know you refuse to be ashamed of circumstances that were not entirely your fault. I know you are kind, even to people who do not deserve your kindness. He paused. And I know that every time I leave this cabin, I count the hours until I can return. Eliza's breath caught. She had felt the connection growing between them, the way her heart lifted whenever she saw his large form emerging from the forest. But hearing him speak the words aloud made it real in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. Nathaniel, I am going to have another man's child in a few weeks. I come with complications that most men would run from. I am not most men. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. Eliza, I do not care about your past or what the town thinks. I care about you, about the woman you are right now sitting here with me, and I care about that baby, because it is a part of you. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. I never thought I would feel this way again. After everything that happened, I thought I had used up my chance at happiness. Life does not work like that. Nathaniel brushed the tears from her face with his thumb. We get as many chances as we are brave enough to take. I am asking you to take one with me. What are you saying? He took a deep breath. I am saying that when that baby comes, I want to be here. Not just as a friend or a neighbor, but as a husband and father. I'm saying I love you, Eliza Warren, and I want to build a life with you. The world seemed to stop spinning. Eliza stared at him, at this beautiful, unexpected man who had crashed into her life like a force of nature. You love me? With everything I am. But Nathaniel, no preacher will marry us. I tried, remember? They all refused because of my situation. A slow smile spread across his face. Then we will not use a preacher. We will marry ourselves, under God's open sky, with the mountains as our witness. That is more sacred to me than any ceremony in a church full of judgmental hypocrites. Eliza felt joy bubble up inside her, so intense it was almost painful. You would do that. I would do anything for you. He squeezed her hand. Say yes, Eliza. Say you will marry me and let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. She thought about everything she had been through. The betrayal, the shame, the long journey to this small cabin. She thought about the town's rejection and the preachers who had turned her away. And then she thought about Nathaniel, who had seen past all of it to the person she truly was, who offered her not pity but partnership, not judgment but genuine love. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Nathaniel's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and reverent, his lips soft against hers. It was nothing like the desperate kisses she had shared with the man who betrayed her. This was different. This was a promise and a beginning all at once. When they pulled apart, Eliza was laughing and crying at the same time. When? She asked. When should we do this? Tomorrow. Nathaniel stood and pulled her carefully to her feet. I will not wait another day to call you my wife. We will go up to the high meadow, the one where the wildflowers still bloom, just you and me and God, the way it should be. That night, Eliza could barely sleep. She lay in her bed listening to the wind in the pines and imagining tomorrow. It would not be the wedding she had once dreamed of as a girl, no white dress or church bells or crowd of well-wishers, but it would be real, built on genuine love rather than social obligation, and that made it more precious than any formal ceremony could ever be. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of September day that made the whole world feel scrubbed clean. Eliza dressed in her best gown, a simple blue calico that stretched over her pregnant belly. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up, tucking wildflowers into the arrangement. Her hands trembled with anticipation as she prepared a small pack with water and bread. Nathaniel arrived at mid-morning, leading his horse. He had cleaned up, his hair and beard neatly trimmed, and he wore a shirt she had never seen before, clearly saved for special occasions. In his hand he carried a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers, purple and gold and white. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he handed her the flowers. "So are you." Eliza smiled up at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. They walked together into the mountains, Nathaniel leading the horse that Eliza rode when the path grew too steep. He pointed out landmarks along the way, telling her stories of his years in these mountains, sharing his world with her. Every word felt like a gift. The meadow was everything he had promised. It sat high in the mountains, surrounded by towering pines and jagged peaks that scraped the sky. Wildflowers carpeted the ground in defiance of the approaching autumn, and a small stream bubbled through the center, its water so clear Eliza could see every stone on the bottom. The air was thin and clean, scented with pine and earth. "This is perfect," Eliza breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Nathaniel helped her down from the horse, his strong hands steadying her. They walked to the center of the meadow, where the sun poured down like a blessing. There was no altar, no audience, no formal structure. Just two people standing in God's creation, ready to pledge their lives to each other. Nathaniel took both her hands in his. "I do not know all the proper words," he said, "but I know what is in my heart. Eliza Warren, I take you as my wife. I promise to love you in all circumstances, to protect you and provide for you and our children. I promise to honor your strength and support you in weakness. I promise to be faithful in thought and deed for all the days of my life. Before God and these mountains, I make this vow." Tears streamed down Eliza's face as she squeezed his hands. "Nathaniel Cross, I take you as my husband. I promise to love you with all that I am, to be your partner in this life we are building. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to honor your courage and match it with my own. I promise to be faithful and true and to build a home filled with love and laughter. Before God and under this open sky, I make this vow." There was a moment of perfect silence, broken only by the wind in the pines and the distant call of a hawk. Then Nathaniel pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, a ring he had traded for in town earlier that week. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Eliza had nothing to give him in return, no ring or token, but she reached up and unpinned the small silver brooch that had been her grandmother's, the only valuable thing she owned. "I have no ring," she said, "but this belonged to someone who understood what real love looked like. I want you to have it, to carry it as a reminder of this day and what we promised each other." Nathaniel took the brooch reverently, pinning it inside his shirt so it rested over his heart. "I will treasure it always." Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and commitment into the embrace. Eliza kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands gripping his broad shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you, husband," Eliza said, testing out the word. "I love you, wife." Nathaniel's smile was radiant. "And I swear to you, I will spend every day proving it." They sat in the meadow for hours, talking and dreaming about their future. Nathaniel wanted to build Eliza a proper house, something larger and sturdier than her current cabin. He spoke of teaching their children to respect the land, to find joy in simple things. Eliza talked about creating a real home, a place of warmth and welcome that would stand in stark contrast to the cold judgment of the town. "We will need to tell people eventually," Eliza said as the sun began its descent toward the peaks, "about our marriage." "Let them talk." Nathaniel pulled her close against his side, careful of her belly. "Our marriage is real and binding, no matter what any preacher or church lady says. We spoke our vows before God. That is all that matters. Do you think they will try to cause trouble?" "Probably." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But I will not let anyone hurt you, Eliza, not anymore. You have me now, and I do not scare easily." They made their way back down the mountain as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. When they reached Eliza's cabin, Nathaniel insisted on carrying her over the threshold, his strong arms making her feel weightless despite her pregnancy. He set her down gently in the center of the small room. "This is our home now," he said, "until I can build us something better." Eliza looked around the humble cabin, seeing it with new eyes. It was small and rough, yes, but it was theirs. A place where they could build their life together, where love mattered more than appearances. That night, they lay together in her narrow bed, Nathaniel's large frame curled protectively around her. He placed his hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick and roll. "Hello in there," he murmured. "This is your papa. I know I'm not the one who made you, but I will love you as if I were. I will teach you everything I know. I will keep you safe. And I will make sure you always know that you were wanted and cherished." Eliza felt tears slip down her temples. She covered Nathaniel's hand with her own. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing us, for loving us. Thank you for letting me." He kissed her shoulder. "Now sleep, wife. You need your rest." She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing and the warmth of his body, feeling safer and more loved than she had in longer than she could remember. The town's reaction to their marriage was predictable. When Eliza appeared in church the following Sunday with Nathaniel at her side, whispers swept through the congregation like wildfire. Reverend Blackwell's face turned purple when Nathaniel calmly informed him that he and Eliza had wed themselves in the mountains, needing no preacher's blessing. "That is not a legal marriage," the Reverend sputtered. "You cannot simply declare yourselves married." "We can, and we did." Nathaniel's voice was steady. "Our vows were spoken before God in one of his most beautiful cathedrals. If you do not want to recognize it, that is your choice. But it does not change the fact that Eliza is my wife, and I am her husband." Catherine Porter stood up from her pew. "This is blasphemy. You cannot allow this, Reverend." Actually, he has no choice. This came from an unexpected source. Old Martin Hendricks, the town's lawyer, rose stiffly from the back pew. He was a quiet man, someone Eliza had barely noticed before. Colorado territory recognizes common law marriage. If two people present themselves as husband and wife and live as such, they are legally married. No ceremony required. The Reverend looked like he had been slapped. "But this goes against everything." "It goes against your preferences," Nathaniel interrupted, "not against the law. Now we came here to worship, same as everyone else. Are you going to let us do that, or do we need to find a place where God's love is actually practiced instead of just preached?" The silence that followed was deafening. Eliza held her breath, her hand gripping Nathaniel's arm. Finally, the Reverend waved them toward a pew with a jerky motion. "Sit down, but I will be watching you, Cross. One step out of line." "You will see exactly what you see now," Nathaniel said calmly, "a man loving his wife and preparing to welcome their child. If that offends you, then the problem is yours, not mine." They sat together through the service, Nathaniel's presence a solid comfort beside her. Eliza could feel eyes boring into her back, could hear the whispers despite the hymns and prayers. But for the first time since arriving in Salvation Creek, she did not feel ashamed or afraid. She had Nathaniel, and he had her, and that was enough. After the service, as they were leaving, an older woman approached them. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and she was one of the few people in town who had never openly shunned Eliza. "I want you to know," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening, "that I think what you did was brave. Both of you. My sister found herself in a similar situation 30 years ago. The town drove her away, and she died alone and heartbroken. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I am glad things are different for you, Mrs. Cross." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Sarah patted her hand. "When the baby comes, you send for me. I have delivered half the children in this town. I will make sure you are taken care of, regardless of what anyone else thinks." As they walked home, Eliza leaned heavily on Nathaniel's arm, exhausted but oddly triumphant. "We did it," she said. "We stood up to them." "We will probably have to do it again," Nathaniel warned. "People like that do not change their minds easily." "I know, but we will face it together." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his blue eyes intense. "Always together. That is a promise, Eliza. From this day forward, you never have to face anything alone." She reached up and touched his bearded cheek. "I'm so grateful for you. Sometimes I cannot believe this is real." "Believe it." He covered her hand with his. "I am real. This love is real, and it is going to last a lifetime." They continued home, and Eliza felt lighter than she had in months. The town might judge them, might whisper and condemn, but it did not matter anymore. She had found something more valuable than their approval. She had found genuine love, the kind that did not falter in the face of adversity. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation and deepening love. Nathaniel moved his belongings down from his mountain camp, consolidating their lives into the small cabin. He worked tirelessly to make the space more comfortable, adding shelves and repairing the chimney so it drew properly. Eliza cooked and cleaned and sewed, creating a home out of rough walls and simple furnishings. They fell into an easy rhythm, learning each other's habits and preferences. Nathaniel rose early, always the first one awake, and he would start the fire and make coffee before Eliza stirred. She learned that he was quiet in the mornings, preferring to ease into the day without much conversation. But by evening he grew talkative, sharing stories of his day or asking about hers. Eliza discovered that despite his rough exterior, Nathaniel was surprisingly well-read. He had brought a small collection of books with him from the East, volumes of poetry and philosophy that he had read until the pages were worn soft. They spent their evenings reading aloud to each other, Nathaniel's deep voice bringing words to life in the firelight. "I never expected a mountain man to quote Shakespeare," Eliza teased one night, her head resting on his shoulder. "I contain multitudes," Nathaniel replied with a grin. "Besides, just because I prefer the wilderness does not mean I abandoned everything from my old life. Some things are worth keeping." Their physical relationship deepened gradually, with Nathaniel always careful of her pregnant state. He touched her with a reverence that made her feel cherished, kissing her slowly and thoroughly, his large hands gentle on her body. They explored each other with patience and growing passion, learning what brought pleasure, building intimacy through both touch and conversation. "You are so beautiful," Nathaniel murmured one night, his hands stroking over her swollen belly. "So incredibly beautiful." "I am huge and ungainly," Eliza protested, but she was smiling. "You are carrying life, creating a miracle. That is the most beautiful thing in the world." He kissed her deeply, and Eliza felt desire curl through her despite her awkward size. Nathaniel knew how to make her feel desired, how to work around her pregnancy to bring them both pleasure. He was patient and creative, always putting her comfort first, and their lovemaking became another way they spoke their love without words. In late September, Eliza woke in the middle of the night to a tightening sensation across her belly. She lay still for a moment, breathing through it, hoping it was just the false labor pains Sarah Mitchell had warned her about. But when another pain came 20 minutes later, she knew it was time. "Nathaniel," she said, shaking his shoulder, "the baby is coming." He was awake instantly, moving from sleep to alert awareness in a heartbeat. "Are you sure?" "Yes. The pains are regular." "Will you get Sarah?" Nathaniel was already pulling on his clothes. "I will be back as fast as I can. Will you be all right alone?" "I will be fine. Just hurry." He kissed her hard and then disappeared into the night. Eliza heard his horse thunder away, and then she was alone with the growing intensity of her labor. She paced the cabin, breathing through contractions, trying to stay calm. This baby was coming, whether she was ready or not. Nathaniel returned with Sarah Mitchell in record time. The older woman took charge immediately, sending Nathaniel to boil water and gather clean cloths while she examined Eliza. "You're doing fine," Sarah said, her voice calm and reassuring. "First babies take their time. We have hours yet, most likely." But the baby had other ideas. Eliza's labor progressed rapidly, each contraction harder and closer together than the last. By dawn, she was bearing down, gripping Nathaniel's hand so hard she thought she might break his fingers. He never flinched, just murmured encouragement and wiped the sweat from her face. "One more push," Sarah urged. "Come on now, give me everything you have." Eliza pushed with all her strength, feeling like she was being torn in half. Then, suddenly, there was release, and the sound of a baby crying filled the cabin. She fell back against the pillows, exhausted and shaking. "You have a son," Sarah announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "A strong, healthy boy." A son. Eliza's vision blurred with tears as Sarah placed the baby in her arms. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with dark hair plastered to his tiny head. His eyes were squeezed shut as he wailed his displeasure at being thrust into the cold world. "Hello, little one," Eliza whispered, her voice breaking. "I am your mama. Welcome to the world." She looked up to find Nathaniel staring at the baby with an expression of pure wonder. His blue eyes were wet with tears, and when he reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, his massive finger was trembling. "He is perfect," Nathaniel said hoarsely. "Eliza, he's absolutely perfect. Do you want to hold him?" Nathaniel looked terrified. "What if I hurt him? I'm too big, too rough." "You will not hurt him." Sarah guided Nathaniel's hands, showing him how to support the baby's head. "There now. See? You are a natural." Nathaniel cradled the baby against his broad chest, looking down at the tiny life in his arms with absolute devotion. "Hello, son," he said softly. "I am your papa. I am going to love you and protect you and teach you how to be a good man. You have the best mama in the world, and you are going to grow up knowing you were wanted and loved every single day." Eliza's tears flowed freely now, happiness and exhaustion and overwhelming love all mixing together. She watched her mountain man husband rock their newborn son, and she knew with absolute certainty that everything she had endured to reach this moment had been worth it. Sarah finished her work and packed up her supplies. "You rest now," she told Eliza. "I will come back tomorrow to check on you both. And do not worry about the town gossip. That baby is legitimate in every way that matters, and I will tell anyone who says otherwise exactly where they can go." After Sarah left, Nathaniel carefully placed the baby back in Eliza's arms and climbed into bed beside them. The three of them lay together in the early morning light, exhausted and happy and complete. "What should we name him?" Eliza asked, studying her son's tiny features. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. "My mother's father was named Samuel. He was a good man, the only one in my family who understood why I needed to leave. He told me to follow my heart, even if it led somewhere unexpected." "Samuel." Eliza tested the name. "Samuel Cross. I like it. It is strong." "Samuel Cross," Nathaniel repeated, stroking the baby's soft hair. "Our son." The word "our" made Eliza's heart swell. Nathaniel had fully claimed this child as his own, with no hesitation or reservation. Samuel would grow up knowing he had a father who chose to love him, which was perhaps even more meaningful than biology. They dozed together as the morning sun climbed higher, the baby sleeping peacefully between them. Eliza had never felt so content, so completely at peace with where her life had led her. Yes, there had been pain and betrayal along the way, but it had all led her here, to this mountain man who loved her fiercely, to this new life they had created together. The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless baby care. Samuel was a healthy, hungry baby who demanded attention around the clock. Eliza was exhausted, but Nathaniel was there every step of the way. He walked the floor with a crying Samuel at 3 a.m, changed diapers without complaint, and marveled at every tiny milestone. When the baby grabbed his finger for the first time, Nathaniel looked at Eliza with such joy that she fell in love with him all over again. "Thank you," she said one evening, watching him rock Samuel to sleep with infinite patience. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are, for loving us so completely. I know this is not the life you planned." "This is exactly the life I planned," Nathaniel interrupted softly. "Maybe I did not know it before I met you, but the moment I saw you in those woods, something in me recognized something in you. This was always meant to be our story, Eliza. I truly believe that." She believed it too. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, they had found each other and built something beautiful. The town's attitude toward them began to shift gradually. It started small. The clerk at the general store began greeting Eliza politely instead of ignoring her. A few other women nodded to her in passing. When Nathaniel brought venison into town to sell, men who had previously avoided him began stopping to talk, asking his advice about hunting or trapping. The turning point came in late October. A fire broke out in one of the town's grain storage buildings, threatening to spread to nearby homes. Nathaniel was in town when it happened, and he immediately jumped into action. His strength and quick thinking helped organize the bucket brigade, and his knowledge of fire behavior prevented the flames from spreading. By the time the fire was out, he had saved several families from losing their homes. The mayor, a portly man named Benjamin Wells, shook Nathaniel's soot-covered hand. We owe you a debt, Cross. If you had not taken charge, half the town might have burned. Anyone would have done the same, Nathaniel said, waving off the thanks. But they did not. You did. Wells cleared his throat awkwardly. I will admit, I had my doubts about you and your wife. The circumstances of your marriage were unconventional, to say the least. But a man's character is shown in his actions, and you have proven yourself today. Word of Nathaniel's heroism spread quickly. Suddenly, the strange mountain man and his wife were no longer outcasts, but valued members of the community. Invitations began arriving for social gatherings. Women who had snubbed Eliza now asked to see the baby, cooing over Samuel and offering parenting advice. The change was gratifying, but also somewhat amusing. Funny how quickly opinions shift, Eliza remarked to Nathaniel. A month ago we were pariahs, now we are respectable. People are like that, Nathaniel said philosophically. They need reasons to accept or reject. The fire gave them a reason to accept us. I will take it, even if the logic is backward. Even Reverend Blackwell softened, though he never quite apologized for his earlier stance. He did, however, agree to perform a baptism for Samuel, acknowledging that Nathaniel and Eliza's marriage was legitimate and their son deserved all the blessings of the church. The baptism took place on a crisp November morning, with Sarah Mitchell and old lawyer Hendricks standing as godparents. Eliza held Samuel as the Reverend poured water over his head, and the baby let out an indignant wail that made the congregation chuckle. "So, Samuel Cross," Reverend Blackwell intoned, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. May you grow in wisdom and grace, and may the love of your parents guide you always." Eliza met Nathaniel's eyes over their son's head, and they shared a smile of triumph. They had weathered the storm. They had stood firm in their love and commitment, and now they were reaping the rewards. As winter settled over the mountains, Nathaniel began work on their new house. He had found a perfect spot about a mile from the cabin, a clearing with good southern exposure and protection from the worst of the winter winds. Every day he worked on it, cutting timber and shaping logs, building their future one beam at a time. Eliza often bundled Samuel up and walked out to watch him work. There was something deeply appealing about seeing her husband's strength put to such purpose. His muscles flexed beneath his shirt as he lifted logs that would have required 3 normal men to move. Sweat dampened his hair despite the cold, and he worked with a focus and determination that spoke of how much this mattered to him. "I want it done by spring," he told her. "I want our family to have a real home, Eliza, something solid and lasting, something we can pass down to our children." "Children?" She raised an eyebrow. "How many are you planning for?" He grinned. "As many as God sees fit to give us. I always wanted a big family. What about you?" Eliza looked down at Samuel, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I think I would like that," she said softly. "A house full of love and laughter and little ones. It sounds perfect." The winter was hard but happy. Snow piled deep around their cabin, and there were days when they could not venture outside at all. But the enforced closeness only strengthened their bond. They talked for hours while Samuel played on a blanket by the fire. They made love by firelight and fell asleep tangled together, warm despite the howling wind outside. Nathaniel proved to be a devoted father. He sang to Samuel in a surprisingly good baritone, made him laugh with silly faces, and patiently played simple games even when he was exhausted from a day of building. Watching him with their son never failed to make Eliza's heart swell. "You're amazing with him," she said one evening. Nathaniel looked up from where he was making Samuel giggle by tickling his belly. "He makes it easy. Look at this face. How could anyone not love him?" His biological father did not, Eliza said quietly. It was the first time she had mentioned the man since marrying Nathaniel. Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Then he was a fool who missed out on the greatest blessing of his life. His loss is my gain. I get to be this little man's papa, get to watch him grow up and teach him about the world. That man will never know what he gave up." "Do you think Samuel will ask about him someday, when he is older?" "Probably." Nathaniel lifted Samuel, holding him up so they were eye to eye. "And when he does, we will tell him the truth, that he had one father by blood and one father by choice, and the second one loved him with everything he had." That is all any child needs to know. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly in their cabin. Nathaniel had carved a wooden horse for Samuel, even though the baby was too young to appreciate it. Eliza gave Nathaniel a new hunting knife she had saved for months to buy, the blade etched with a simple inscription, "To my heart, my home, my husband." He held it reverently, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Eliza, this is too much." "No, it is not." She wrapped her arms around him. "You gave me everything, Nathaniel. A new life, a new name, hope for the future. This is just a knife, but I hope every time you use it, you remember how much I love you." He kissed her deeply, holding her tight against his chest. "I do not need a knife to remember that, but I will treasure it anyway." They made love that night with the kind of passion that comes from deep emotional connection. Nathaniel worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, taking his time despite her urgency. When he finally entered her, it felt like coming home. They moved together slowly, savoring every sensation, whispering words of love between kisses. Their climax was intense and simultaneous, leaving them both shaking in each other's arms. "I love you," Eliza breathed against his neck, "so much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared," Nathaniel stroked her hair. "Love this strong can withstand anything. I am not going anywhere, Eliza, not ever." Spring arrived in a rush of melting snow and budding flowers. The new house was nearly finished, a beautiful two-story structure with real glass windows and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Nathaniel had put his heart into every detail, from the smooth floorboards to the stone fireplace that dominated the main room. "It is like a dream," Eliza whispered when he first showed her the completed interior. She ran her hand over the kitchen counter he had built, imagining all the meals she would prepare there. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms, 1 for them and 2 for children. The master bedroom had a large window overlooking the mountains, and Eliza could already picture waking up to that view every morning. "Do you really like it?" Nathaniel asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know it is not fancy by city standards." "It is perfect," Eliza interrupted. "It is ours, Nathaniel, our home. That makes it the most beautiful house in the world." They moved in during April, carrying their modest possessions from the cabin to the new house. Samuel, now 6 months old and beginning to sit up on his own, seemed to sense the excitement. He babbled and laughed as they arranged furniture and hung curtains. Their first night in the new house, they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Nathaniel's arm was around Eliza's waist, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "Happy?" he asked. "Beyond words." She turned to look up at him. "A year ago, I was alone and scared, certain my life was ruined. Now, I have everything I could ever want. A husband I love beyond measure, a beautiful son, a real home. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Nathaniel kissed her temple. "We found each other right when we needed to. That is grace, Eliza, pure grace." The years that followed were filled with work and love and growing family. Eliza gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1874, a beautiful girl they named Grace for the blessing she represented. Nathaniel was just as devoted to her as he was to Samuel, proving that his heart had infinite capacity for love. 2 years later, another son arrived, who they named Daniel. Then, in 1878, twin girls shocked and delighted them both. Nathaniel built additions onto the house to accommodate their growing family, and the walls echoed with laughter and occasional arguments. Samuel grew into a strong, thoughtful boy who worshipped his father and learned everything Nathaniel could teach him about the mountains and wilderness. He never asked about his biological father until he was 10 years old. When he did, Nathaniel sat him down and explained the truth gently but honestly. "So I am not really your son?" Samuel asked, his young face troubled. "You are absolutely my son," Nathaniel said firmly. "Being a father is not about who contributed what at conception. It is about who shows up every day, who teaches you and loves you and is there when you need them. I have been your papa since before you were born, Samuel. That will never change." "But what about the man who helped make me? Do you think he ever wonders about me?" Nathaniel considered the question carefully. "I do not know, son. But I do know that his loss was my greatest gain. Because of his mistake, I got the privilege of being your father. I would not trade that for anything in the world." Samuel hugged him tight. "I am glad you are my papa. I would not want anyone else." The incident strengthened their bond even further. Samuel began introducing Nathaniel as his father with a fierce pride, and Nathaniel made sure all his children knew they were loved equally and completely. Eliza thrived in her role as mother and wife. The house was always filled with warmth and good smells, and neighbors began stopping by regularly for her advice or just friendly conversation. The woman who had once been shunned was now the heart of a vibrant community. Her relationship with Nathaniel deepened with each passing year. They still made time for each other despite the demands of 5 children. Sometimes, when the kids were all in bed, they would sit on the porch and talk the way they had when they were newlyweds, sharing their thoughts and dreams. Other times, they would steal away to their bedroom and make love with the passionate intensity of people who truly knew and cherished each other. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked one night as they lay tangled together after lovemaking. "Taking on me and Samuel? You could have had an easier life." Nathaniel propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at her. "Not for 1 second. You and our children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I was surviving before I met you, Eliza. But I was not really living. You taught me what it means to have a purpose beyond myself. You saved me," she said simply. "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he kissed her softly. "That is what love does. It rescues us from our loneliness and gives us a reason to be better than we thought we could be." The town of Salvation Creek grew and prospered over the years, and the Cross family was central to its development. Nathaniel's knowledge of the land helped guide expansion, and his strong back was always available when someone needed help. Eliza started teaching the town's children, turning their front room into a makeshift schoolhouse during winter months. Sarah Mitchell became a close friend and honorary grandmother to their children. She was there for the birth of each baby, and she was the first person Eliza went to with questions or concerns. When Sarah grew too old to attend births alone, Eliza trained as her assistant, learning the skills that would allow her to help other women the way Sarah had helped her. Even Reverend Blackwell eventually became something close to a friend. He never quite apologized for his initial treatment of Eliza, but he made amends through his actions, always speaking highly of the Cross family and using their story as an example of redemption and grace in his sermons. As their children grew, Nathaniel and Eliza made sure they understood the importance of accepting others, regardless of their circumstances. They taught them to look past surface judgments to the person underneath, to offer help to those in need without expecting anything in return. "Your mother and I know what it is like to be judged unfairly," Nathaniel told them one evening around the dinner table. "We know how much it hurts to be rejected for things beyond your control. So in this family, we treat everyone with respect and kindness. That is not negotiable." The children took the lesson to heart. Samuel, especially, developed a strong, protective instinct toward underdogs and outcasts. When a new family moved to town under questionable circumstances, Samuel was the first to welcome them, earning his parents' proud smiles. Time passed in the way it does when life is full and happy. Samuel grew into a man, tall and strong like his father, and eventually married a sweet girl from a neighboring town. Grace became a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps. Daniel trained as a carpenter, learning from his father's building skills. The twins, wild and mischievous, brought endless laughter to the household. Nathaniel's hair began to show silver at the temples, but he was still as strong and vital as ever. He still hunted in the mountains he loved, though now he often took his sons and grandsons with him, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. Eliza's dark hair also grayed, but her eyes remained as bright as ever. She looked at her life with profound gratitude every single day. The scared, pregnant woman who had arrived in Salvation Creek all those years ago felt like a different person. That woman had been broken and desperate. The woman Eliza had become was strong and confident, secure in the knowledge that she was deeply loved. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel took Eliza back to the high meadow where they had married themselves under God's open sky. The wildflowers were in full bloom, just as they had been on that long-ago September day. 20 years, Eliza marveled, turning in a circle just as she had the first time. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Best 20 years of my life. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. His beard was fully gray now, but his blue eyes still held the same intensity they had when he first spoke his vows. I meant what I said that day, Eliza. Every word. And I would say it all again right now if you wanted me to. I know you would. She reached up to cup his face. You have proven it every day for 2 decades. You are the best man I have ever known, Nathaniel Cross, and I love you more now than I did when we stood here the first time. More, he smiled. I thought that would be impossible. I loved you so completely from the start. Love grows, Eliza said softly. It deepens with every shared experience, every challenge overcome together. The love I felt for you 20 years ago was real and powerful. But the love I feel now has been tested by life and proven unbreakable. That makes it even more precious. Nathaniel kissed her then, long and deep, and Eliza felt the same spark she had felt at 18, at 22, at 30, and now at 42. Some things did not diminish with time. Some things only got better. They made love in the meadow, hidden by the tall grass and wildflowers, their bodies still knowing each other's rhythms despite the years. It was slower than it had been in their youth, more tender perhaps, but no less passionate. When they finished, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, staring up at the endless blue sky. Do you remember what you said to me the first day we met? Eliza asked. Nathaniel thought for a moment. I said these woods do not belong to anyone. You are welcome to whatever you need. You were talking about firewood, but it felt like more than that even then, like you were offering me more than just help with practical things. Maybe I was. He stroked her hair. Maybe some part of me recognized you right from the start, recognized that you were going to change everything. Do you think we would have found each other if I had not come to Salvation Creek? If I had gone somewhere else? I like to think so. Nathaniel pulled her closer. I like to think that some connections are meant to be, that fate or God or whatever you want to call it guides us toward the people we need. But even if that is just romantic nonsense, I am grateful for every choice that led you to that cabin and me to those woods. However it happened, I am thankful. They stayed in the meadow until sunset, talking and remembering and simply being together. When they finally returned home, their children and grandchildren were gathered on the porch, a surprise celebration they had planned without their parents' knowledge. 20 years, Samuel declared, raising a glass of cider and toast, to the best parents anyone could ask for. You showed us what real love looks like, and we are all better for it. The celebration lasted late into the night, filled with food and music and stories. Eliza sat on the porch rail, watching her family laugh together, and felt her heart might burst from happiness. This was what she had dreamed of in her darkest moments, this abundance of love and joy. She had not dared believe it was possible, but here it was, real and solid and hers. Nathaniel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. What are you thinking about? He murmured in her ear. Everything. Nothing. How blessed we are. That we are. He kissed her neck. Though I still say you are the blessing. You made all of this possible, Eliza. Your courage, your refusal to give up, your capacity to love despite being hurt. That is what built this family. We built it together, she corrected. You were the one who saw past everyone else's judgment. You were the one brave enough to marry a pregnant woman under God's open sky when no preacher would do it. You gave me a new start when I thought my life was over. Then we are both blessed. He turned her around to face him, and we still have many years ahead of us to continue being blessed together. That prediction proved true. Nathaniel and Eliza lived long, healthy lives, their love story becoming something of a legend in Salvation Creek. People told their story to illustrate that true love could overcome any obstacle, that society's rules mattered less than genuine commitment. As they grew older, they remained each other's closest companion. They took walks through the mountains Nathaniel loved, moving slower but still finding joy in the beauty around them. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Samuel took over managing the property as Nathaniel's strength began to wane, but the old mountain man still offered advice and guidance. Grace became the town's primary teacher, carrying on her mother's legacy of education. Daniel built houses all over the territory, each one reflecting the care and craftsmanship his father had taught him. The twins married brothers from a nearby town and started their own families, filling Eliza's life with even more grandchildren to love. Through it all, Nathaniel and Eliza remained the center of it all, the foundation upon which the family was built. Their love was a constant, unchanging thing that everyone could depend on. When Nathaniel turned 70, his health began to decline. His body, which had always been so strong and reliable, started to fail him. He moved slower, tired more easily, struggled with tasks that had once been simple, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Eliza never wavered. "I am not ready to leave you yet," he told her one night as they lay in bed. His voice was weaker than it had been, but still filled with determination. "We are supposed to have more time." "We have had a lifetime," Eliza said, though tears streamed down her face. "More happiness than most people ever dream of. If God calls you home, you go. Do not stay for me and suffer." "Being with you is never suffering." He squeezed her hand. "Every moment with you has been a gift, Eliza, even these last ones when everything hurts and I cannot do the things I used to do. Just being beside you makes it worthwhile." They talked long into the night, remembering their years together, saying all the things they had always meant to say. Eliza told him about the first moment she saw him in the woods, how his unexpected gentleness had given her hope. Nathaniel confessed that he had fallen in love with her before they ever spoke, something about her courage and dignity calling to him. "I knew you were special," he said. "I knew you were going to turn my world upside down, and I was right." "I was so lucky to find you," Eliza whispered, "so incredibly lucky. We found each other." His thumb rubbed across her knuckles. "That is what matters. We found each other, and we built something beautiful." Nathaniel passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family, with Eliza holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you," directed at his wife, and then he was gone. The grief nearly destroyed Eliza. For 50 years, Nathaniel had been her anchor, her partner, her greatest love. Without him, the world felt colorless and cold. But her children rallied around her, supporting her through the worst of the mourning, reminding her of all the good years they had shared. "He would not want you to give up," Samuel told her gently. "He would want you to keep living, keep finding joy, honor his memory by being the strong woman he fell in love with." So Eliza did. She continued teaching, continued spending time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about Nathaniel, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had never known him in his prime. She visited his grave regularly, sitting beside the headstone and talking to him as though he could hear. And maybe he could. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the pines, she swore she could hear his voice telling her he loved her, telling her to be strong. On those days, she smiled through her tears and whispered back, "I love you too, my heart. I will see you again someday." Eliza lived another 5 years after Nathaniel's death, long enough to see her great-grandchildren start families of their own. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, her children buried her beside Nathaniel in the little cemetery overlooking the valley. Her headstone read, "Eliza Cross, beloved wife and mother. She loved fiercely and without shame." Nathaniel's read, "Nathaniel Cross, mountain man and family man. He saw past the surface to the soul." Together, even in death, they watched over the valley where they had built their life. Their story became part of Salvation Creek's history, told and retold with each generation. The house Nathaniel built still stood strong, home to Samuel's descendants, filled with the laughter and love of family. And sometimes, on clear autumn days when the wildflowers bloomed in the high meadow, people swore they could see 2 figures standing together under God's open sky, still speaking their vows, still choosing each other over and over again. Some things, it seemed, were eternal. Some loves transcended even death. In the end, Eliza and Nathaniel's story was not about overcoming scandal or defying society's expectations, though they had done both. It was about 2 wounded souls finding each other at exactly the right moment and choosing to build something beautiful together. It was about love that refused to be limited by other people's rules, love that created its own sacredness without needing anyone's permission. They had married themselves under God's open sky when no preacher would do it, and that marriage had proved stronger and more lasting than any ceremony in any church could have made it, because it was built on genuine commitment, on seeing and accepting each other completely, flaws and all. It was built on choosing each other every single day, through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow. That was the legacy they left behind. Not wealth or fame or social standing, but the knowledge that real love existed, that it was worth fighting for, worth defending, worth building a life around. Their descendants carried that knowledge forward, generation after generation, creating their own love stories, inspired by the example Nathaniel and Eliza had set. And in the mountains above Salvation Creek, in a meadow where wildflowers bloomed eternal, their love remained. A testament to what was possible when two people were brave enough to defy expectations and follow their hearts. A reminder that sometimes the most sacred ceremonies happen without witnesses, spoken between two souls who need no preacher to validate what they know in their hearts is true and right and blessed by something far greater than any institution. No preacher would marry her, they had said. But they were wrong. She married herself to a mountain man under God's open sky, and that marriage became the stuff of legend. A love story for the ages, proving that true commitment needs no church, no congregation, no formal blessing beyond the vows two people speak to each other with honest hearts. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and separation. But it also continued in the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward, in the house that still stood strong against mountain winds, in the memories preserved and passed down like precious heirlooms. Nathaniel and Eliza Cross had lived and loved fully, holding nothing back, and that made all the difference. They had been given a second chance when the world said they deserved none. They had taken that chance and transformed it into a lifetime of happiness, and in doing so, they had proved that love, real love, was the most powerful force in the world, more powerful than judgment, more lasting than scandal, more sacred than any ceremony conducted within four walls. Under God's open sky, they had become one, and under that same sky, their love would remain forever, a beacon for anyone who had ever been told they were unworthy, anyone who had ever felt cast out or rejected. Their story whispered the same message across the years. You are worthy. You are deserving of love. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And when you find the person who sees your true value, hold on tight and never let go. That was the gift Nathaniel and Eliza Cross gave to the world, not just their love story, but the promise that such stories were possible for anyone brave enough to reach for them. And in the mountains above Salvation Creek, where wildflowers bloomed and winds whispered through pine trees, that promise remained eternal.